What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp podcast. I am me, and I am by myself today. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a solo episode today. We're going to be talking about some NHL news as well as wrapping up the Eastern Conference Finals and doing our Stanley Cup Finals preview. So I guess we'll just start. I'll start by talking about some of the NHL news that's been flying around. The Buffalo Sabres and the Minnesota Wild made a trade recently. It was 1-for-1. It was Eric Staal straight up for Marcus Johansson from the Buffalo Sabres. And this was a bit of a weird trade to me. I don't really see the direction that this trade was supposed to take for either team. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. From Minnesota's standpoint, I mean, sure, you move on from Eric Staal. You get a younger player in Marcus Johansson. Johansson only has 1 year left on his contract, so you can renegotiate that with him after. Eric Staal also only had 1 year left on his contract. So if Buffalo wishes, they can renegotiate his deal with them after the fact. I'm just not really sure why this trade was made in the first place, really, for either team. For Minnesota, does trading Eric Staal for, again, another ready-to-compete middle six forward, does that shift the needle? Does the addition of, even if you combine Johansson with Nick Bjugstad, is this really shifting the needle for the Minnesota Wild into competing? No, not really. Actually, not at all. Even if you combine those two trades, I'm still not seeing the direction here besides just adding more okay players to an already mediocre team. They would be much better off having trade Eric Staal for draft picks or prospects to start the rebuild, or at least something with a little bit of vision, because Johansson on a 1 year deal, if he doesn't want to sign with the Dallas Stars or the Minnesota Wild, then what was the point? You could have received something tangible in return as opposed to essentially what is a 1 year rental in Marcus Johansson. And for the Buffalo Sabres, I mean, you get a little bit of offensive help in Eric Staal. He's still an okay player. He can still play in your top six. But that being said, does this change the Buffalo Sabres situation? Not really. They need to be addressing the issues in net. They need to be addressing, this does address some of the issues up front. It gives Jack Eichel a little bit of help up front. If Jack Eichel ends up playing with Eric Staal, it gives them a legitimate second line center option. If they want to split up Eichel and Staal, it definitely does address some of the issues up front, but it doesn't really address it in a way that fits the mold of the team going forward. I mean, Eric Staal is probably really not going to have that many great, peak years left in the NHL if he's got even one or two more. The Sabres aren't exactly an old team. I mean, Eichel, Reinhart, Olofsson, Ristolainen, Dahlin, these guys are all still young. They're still young players. So to add a guy who's probably only going to be performing at his level for another year or two, I'm not in love with that idea. You're better off trying to get somebody who's younger. Ideally, somebody who's like in that, ready to compete now, like 26 to 28-year-old range. I mean, I know you're going to have to pay a premium price for a player like that, but it doesn't really address the issues in net. They could also use some help on defense. Doesn't address that. Gives them a little bit of depth down the middle, which is always nice to have. So I can at least somewhat say that this addresses an issue that the Buffalo Sabres do have, which is, this gives them a scoring option outside of Jack Eichel, but I'm still not in love with the trade. So a bit of a weird trade for me for both teams. Not really in love with it for either one. The nice part about it for both teams is it doesn't lock them in any long-term contracts. Both guys are up at the end of the season, so I don't know. Oh, goodness. A very weird trade for me. Not in love with it for either team, but we'll see. Another piece of NHL news: Joel Edmondson did end up signing a contract with the Montreal Canadiens. I believe it was a $3.25 million contract, so they do have him under contract. So he will not be just walking away in free agency, which is nice for them. They needed to get that addressed and make sure that they didn't just make that trade just for him to walk away and get nothing out of it. So, we went in depth on that trade last time. I'm still questioning, what was the point of the trade? Was it really, really worth it in the end? But I don't know. We'll have to see if it even ends up being something that they take into the season, or if it ends up being something that they end up just moving away before the season starts. So I think that's it as far as NHL news is concerned. If I'm forgetting anything, I'll probably remember it by the end of the video, and then I'll just cry myself to sleep. So we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up the Eastern Conference Finals between the New York Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Yes, unfortunately, my New York Islanders were eliminated in 6 games. A Game 6 overtime winner sends the Tampa Bay Lightning to the Stanley Cup Finals. But, I think for the New York Islanders, there's really nothing to be ashamed of in this series. I mean, if you mulligan Game 1, this is a 3-2 series for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They kind of got a little fortunate that Game 1 was essentially a scheduled loss. But that's not to take away anything from what the Tampa Bay Lightning did. I mean, they were clearly, they're clearly a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. People have been saying that they should be competing for the last couple of years, and they finally get it done. So this marks their first return to the Stanley Cup Finals since 2015, where they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. It was a good series. I mean, really, like I said, outside of Game 1, every game was tight. Every game was close. I mean, Game 2, the Islanders only lost by 1 goal on a very late goal by Nikita Kucherov. If that game goes to overtime, who knows what happens. The Islanders end up pulling out a double overtime win in Game 5, and then unfortunately just could not find that one extra goal in Game 6 to send it to a Game 7. So an incredibly tight series. As far as what this means for the New York Islanders going forward, I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason. They have a lot of contracts that they need to give out. Ryan Pulock needs a contract. Matt Barzal needs a contract. Devon Toews needs a contract. So we're going to have to see what Lou Lamoriello has up his sleeve. I imagine that there will be some pieces that are moved out this offseason to accommodate the younger guys getting their big boy deals. We have younger players that may be able to be inserted into the lineup. I could easily see us running a third line of a lot of young guys. I mean, Kiefer Bellows might be up with the big club. Oliver Wahlstrom might be up with the big club. Noah Dobson looks like he's probably going to get more ice time next season. He had an up and down first season in the NHL. Didn't play a whole lot. When he played, he was kind of iffy, but as a young defenseman, I think he's only 18 or 19 years old. That's very, very young for a defenseman to step right into the NHL straight out of juniors. That really doesn't happen that often. Defensemen are much like goaltenders. Usually they play a couple of years down in the minors, and they take a little bit longer to develop. But, you saw peaks of what he can do, and he's got the legs. He's got, a good puck control. He's got good sense. He just needs to round out that defensive game a little bit. So, I mean, he's very much, in my mind, in the mold of a Devon Toews, where he's an active, fast, puck-moving type defenseman who isn't afraid to jump into the play. So it'll be interesting to see, if we maybe sign Toews to, a bridge contract only to have him be moved out in a couple of years if Noah Dobson looks ready to take on his role. Maybe he can quarterback that power play and see what goes on from there. Like I said, up front, there's going to have to be some moves made. going to have to try to find some way to ship out some of these contracts that maybe aren't the best. Obviously with Thomas Greiss going to free agency, he's not going to be coming back because we have Varlamov and Sorokin going forward. Like I said, we have a lot of young forwards. Like Kiefer Bellows really probably should be playing a full season next year with us up in a big club. Oliver Wahlstrom could make that next step and play with the big club. The only issue is we're going to have to find space for these guys on the roster. And that might unfortunately mean some guys are going to have to get shipped out. I mean, we could see players like Josh Bailey moved out. We could see guys like Jordan Eberle moved out. Potentially could see one of Nick Leddy or Johnny Boychuk moved out. We could see if we can find a team willing to take on the Komarov contract or the Clutterbuck contract, we could see guys like them moved out. Ross Johnson will probably play almost every game next season if that is the case. Unfortunately, I don't know if Matt Martin will be re-signed. It's going to be a very interesting offseason, but for the first time in a long time, I feel confident that we will come out of this offseason not a total mess. We have good leadership in Lou Lamoriello. We have the best coach in the NHL. I'm just going to put it out there. Barry Trotz is the best coach in the NHL, in my opinion, at this point. Because we were the only team that was a qualifying team left in the Stanley Cup playoffs when we got eliminated for a reason. Barry Trotz has done wonders with this team. Lou Lamoriello has built a contender. We have the ultimate Swiss Army knife in J.G. Pageau for the next couple of years. So if we can find a way to shed some of the not great contracts, the Garth Snow holdover contracts, maybe we could pay like a team like Detroit to take on Andrew Ladd's contract, or pay him to take Calmorow's contract. Maybe we throw in a couple picks for them to just eat that contract for the next 3 years while they have the cap space. Who knows? But I'm very confident in our ability to come back next season and be just as good, if not better than this season. We have, obviously there's a lot of hype around Ilya Sorokin. There's a lot of rumors flying around regarding some players. Really the only gaping hole in the lineup is we just don't have that automatic 30 goal scorer, which would be really nice. A lot of people were saying that potentially Mike Hoffman would be a good fit for that power play one-timer specialist type guy. If he wants out of Florida, we'll see. But either way, it'll be a very interesting offseason for the New York Islanders. But I don't think that this is like, a peak or a blip on the radar. I imagine that this team will be able to easily make consistent second rounds. And then, from there on, it's just getting a little lucky, winning a series, and getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I feel good about it. I feel good about it for the first time in a long time. So I think that's pretty much it. And obviously for the Tampa Bay Lightning, this is an important step for this club. Obviously, obviously like I said earlier, they made the Stanley Cup Finals back in 2015. And this was something that needed to happen because this is a team that had been kind of underachieving since then. I mean, they've consistently made, deep playoff runs last year notwithstanding, but, it felt like this was only a matter of time before this team actually got back to the Stanley Cup Finals. And it'll be interesting. Ironically, the last time they were in the Stanley Cup Finals, Ben Bishop was starting for them. And in theory they're playing against Ben Bishop, but they're really not because he's been hurt. So it's going to be Anton Khudobin, which we'll get into that. But this needed to happen. This team has been too good, too talented, and too dangerous for how long to not get back to the final. So a 5-year absence for them, and they're facing off against the Dallas Stars. So let's get into that. I know that the Tampa Bay Lightning come in heavy favorites on a lot of people's minds to win the Stanley Cup. Obviously, I'm going to go to bat for the Dallas Stars because, well, I picked them in my bracket, and I still do genuinely believe that they will win the Stanley Cup. But we're going to get into everything here. We're going to take a deep dive into this teams, and we'll see if I change my mind through the course of this episode. But we'll start with the team stats. I'll just run down the list. We'll talk about each one a little bit. The goals for per game, Tampa Bay Lightning come in with a 3.11 goals for per game. Dallas Stars at 2.95, and that's actually very surprising to me that it's even that close. This Dallas Stars team is really weird because on paper they're built to be heavy and defend and hit hard and, physically impose their will on the other team, but they're coming in scoring a lot of goals. And then when you take a look at the goals against, the Dallas Stars actually come in minus on the goals against here. The Tampa Bay Lightning are averaging 2.21 goals against per game, whereas the Dallas Stars are averaging 3.05 goals against per game, and that's a significant difference. And that's really not what you would expect from a Dallas Stars team that's built this way. I mean, they shed some of their more offensive players like Jason Spezza and Matt Zuccarello for some grit and some grind, like a guy like Joe Pavelski, who has bought the offense as well, but he's more of a locker room leader and a physical presence more than Jason Spezza Zuccarello was. They bought in a guy like Corey Perry, and yet their goals against is actually higher than their goals for. It's a very weird Dallas Stars team. The power play, and this was another thing that surprised me, the power play, the Dallas Stars are clicking at 27.3%, whereas the Tampa Bay Lightning are only at 17.9%. That's a significant difference. This Dallas Stars team is scoring on 1 out of every 4 power plays, just about. And that is not what you'd expect. And you wouldn't expect, the Lightning power play, sure, it's 17.9%. That's not bad. But you'd really expect them to be pushing that 20%. And that 2% can make a difference. It's a very strange thing to see the Dallas Stars at 10% higher than the Tampa Bay Lightning. That could be something to keep an eye out. And the penalty kill's fairly even. The Dallas Stars 83.3, Tampa Bay Lightning 83.6. So when it comes to the special teams battle, it does actually look like the Dallas Stars have a pretty significant edge. The penalty kills more or less even out, and the Dallas Stars power play is, propelling this team forward. So it's something to keep an eye on, that the Dallas Stars might have the edge in special teams going into this series, which is not something I would have expected. Shots per game, the Tampa Bay Lightning, obviously no surprise, coming in at 35.5 to the Stars 30.7. The Stars don't really generate a lot of offense in terms of shots, but they're very opportunistic, as you can see, based on the fact that they have a 2.95 goals for per game. They're pushing that 3 goals per game that the Lightning are at. Shots against per game, the Tampa Bay Lightning are at 30.7, the Dallas Stars are at 33.1. So not a huge difference in this, honestly. It's fairly close. I do expect the Tampa Bay Lightning to more control the flow of the offense in these games. I expect their shot totals to be higher than the Dallas Stars. I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights outshot Dallas every single game of the last series except for game 1 where they were even. And yet the Dallas Stars came out in 5 games, and I think that's just the Dallas Stars being opportunistic. They don't miss their opportunities very often. So a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, who they can defend fairly well, but they're not exactly, stalwarts on defense, despite what their goals against per game is going to tell you. They do give up opportunities that the Dallas Stars might not miss. They're being very, very opportunistic in this postseason. Face-off percentage, Dallas Stars has a slight edge, 50% to Tampa Bay's 48.4. Not a huge difference, but that one face-off can mean a huge difference in any game. If you win that face-off back to your defenseman, that could be the difference between a goal and not a goal right there. So these statistics going forward are going to be a little bit weighted, so that's why I added the weighted statistics. So the hits, the Dallas Stars have 879 to the Lightning's 853. The blocks, or the hits per 60 minutes, the Dallas Stars are at 40.8 to the Tampa Bay Lightning's 38.62. Again, not a huge difference, but I will get into how I do genuinely believe the Dallas Stars have the edge in the physical game. I will get into that later on in the episode. Blocks, the Dallas Stars have 362 blocks to the Lightning's 350. Blocks per 60, the Dallas Stars are blocking about 16.8 shots to the Lightning's 15.8. I think that more or less comes from the fact that the Dallas Stars don't really control possession of the puck that much. They're really typically in their own end more than they're not. Giveaways and takeaways, this was an interesting one. Giveaways, the Dallas Stars give away the puck at a 60-minute rate of 14.85 to the Tampa Bay Lightning's 9.87. So when the Lightning have the puck, they don't give it away. They're very precise on their passing. They're very talented in keeping possession, and I think that's going to be reflected in these games going forward. I'm pretty sure, if I was a betting man, I would say, I'm almost positive that every single game of this series, I would be willing to say that the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to outpossess and outshoot the Dallas Stars. Takeaways. Per 60, the Dallas Stars average 8.07 to the Lightning 6.47. You can make of that what you will. You can either say, well, the Dallas Stars are clearly better at defending than the Lightning, or you could just say, look, the opponents of the Tampa Bay Lightning don't have the puck that often, so the Lightning don't need to take away the puck that often because they're controlling the flow of play. Overtime records, both of these clubs are very good in overtime. Until they met the Islanders in the playoffs, the Lightning were perfect in overtime. They have a 5-1 record. They only lost once in OT, and that was to the New York Islanders, whereas the Dallas Stars are 4-0. So both of these teams are very good in OT. So if the game goes to overtime, that's really a toss-up in my opinion. There's not one team that's really running away far and away better in the overtime period. So taking a look at these team stats, you might really say, well, the Dallas Stars are clearly at a disadvantage in the offensive and defensive sections of the game, whereas, they have a little bit of an edge in some of the intangibles like face-off percentages, hits, blocks, and takeaways. Well, and as we know that those little intangibles might make a huge difference in a series, and I do think it will. And I will get to that when I kind of do my whole wrap up at the end here. So we'll go to the head-to-head comparison for the goaltenders. Anton Khudobin comes in with a 12-6 record with a 2.62 goals against and a 9.20 save percentage. Andrei Vasilevskiy comes in with a 14-5 record with a 1.82 goals against average and a 9.31 save percentage. So on paper, when you do look at it, the Lightning have a huge advantage in net. Vasilevskiy is playing the way that we know Vasilevskiy does on paper. The reason I say on paper is if you watched games 4 and 5 of that Vegas Golden Knights series, Anton Khudobin hit a level that I've never seen before. I mean, the amount of cross-crease saves that this guy was making, the amount of high-danger chances that he was stopping, it was just absurd. I really don't think that his stats reflect just how well he played in those games against the Vegas Golden Knights. Arguably, through the whole series, he was the reason that the Dallas Stars won in 5 or won period, because they were outshot every night, and who was there to bail them out every night was Anton Khudobin. So it's also a little bit skewed because Vasilevskiy was coming off a series against the Bruins and then coming off a series against the Islanders, where those two teams really aren't necessarily the highest scoring teams, whereas Khudobin was coming off a series against the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights, two teams who are a little bit more offensively minded, specifically the Colorado Avalanche. So those stats are a little bit skewed. I would say on paper, yes, the goaltending edge has to go to the Tampa Bay Lightning, but if you watch the last couple of games with the way Anton Khudobin has been playing, I'd almost be willing to call it even. It's definitely something to look out for. And that's not a knock on anything Andrei Vasilevskiy has been doing, more of just a nod to just how good Anton Khudobin has been. You can't just look at the stats and say, oh, he has a 2.62. That's not good enough in the playoffs. I mean, you have to look at the quality of saves he's making, and he really bailed out the Dallas Stars in that series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, against the Vegas Golden Knights. If you look at some team leaders, we'll look at the team leaders here. So for goals, Gurionov and Pavelski are tied for a team lead with 9 for the Stars. And Braden Point and Victor Hedman are tied with 9 goals for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Raise your hand if you had Victor Hedman with the 9 goals. I mean, everyone knows how good he is in his defensive zone, but he's really finding another level to his offensive game in these playoffs. And that's a scary thing for the Dallas Stars, because they already have guys like Mikhail Sergachev and Kevin Shattenkirk on the back end who can put the puck in the net. So, having Victor Hedman not just be the stalwart on defense that he is, but rounding out, and then not even just rounding out, but finding another level to that offensive game of his is not something you want to see happen. If we look at the leader in assists for both teams, Miro Heiskanen leads the Dallas Stars with 17 assists. Nikita Kucherov leads the Lightning with 20 assists. Kind of a strange situation. Heiskanen leads the Stars with 22 points. Kucherov leads the Lightning with 26 points, but only 6 goals. And I say only 6 goals because guys like Point and Hedman have 9. And you would think that Kuch is the guy that should be leading this offense as far as goals are concerned, but he's racking up the apples this postseason. No surprise there that Heiskanen is leading the Dallas Stars in points. I mean, we know how good Miro Heiskanen is. He's just unbelievable as far as his offensive game is concerned. Hits, Jamie Alexiak leads the Dallas Stars with 90. Blake Coleman leads the Tampa Bay Lightning with 89, so pretty close there. Face-off wins, Joe Pavelski has 153 to Braden Point's 152. And time on ice, Heiskanen leads the Dallas Stars with 25-43 to the Tampa Bay Lightning's 26-31. So, time on ice was an interesting stat that I wanted to take a look at just to see how much these guys are playing. And what I found was really interesting. So the defenseman time on ice for the Dallas Stars, no surprise that Heiskanen, Klingberg, Lindell, and Alexiak are playing over 21 minutes a night each. And then for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Chernak, Sergachev, McDonough, Hedman are also playing over 20 minutes. Hedman is playing 26-31 a night. Now, these time on ice stats, I'm going to preface this by saying, are going to be skewed by the amount of overtimes these teams have played. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Lightning had that 5 overtime game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, but that only counts as one game, so that kind of throws off their average time on ice. Also, the double overtime games that we've seen, that throws off your average time on ice. But one of the interesting things I found about the Dallas Stars is their forward time on ice is fairly even. Their number one guy as far as time on ice is concerned is Joe Pavelski playing 17:58, and their bottom guy is Yoel Kiviranta, who's playing 11:55 a night. Compare that to the Tampa Bay Lightning's Nikita Kucherov playing 21:58 a night to Carter Verhaeghe's 11:36. And that clearly shows you something there. I think that there's something worth talking about there. Now, again, Kucherov's time on ice is going to be a little bit weighted because of all those overtime games, or the overtime period specifically. But that tells you a little bit. That tells you that specifically in those overtime games that John Cooper is not comfortable with his forward depth as much as Rick Bowness is. The Dallas Stars have played their fair share of overtime games too. So to have their leading guy at about 18 minutes and their bottom guy at about 12 minutes, as opposed to the Tampa Bay Lightning, whose leading guy is 22 minutes to Carter Verhaeghe's 11:36, that tells you a little bit something. And there's also something to note, and here's where I'm going to go into like my wrap up and what I think about the series in general. The Lightning have been going 11 forward, 7D for most of these playoffs. And I think that tells you, that John Cooper knows that the style of defense that the Lightning play, where they're very active in the play, they're rushing up the ice, they're in the offensive zone looking for opportunities, is strenuous enough that they need to add that 7th defenseman, who most often has been Luke Schenn for this playoff run. But I also think it shows you that he doesn't really run 4 lines the way that Rick Bowness has been doing. I mean, If you look at Yoel Kiviranta, what he's been doing with that limited ice time has been nothing short of amazing with the Dallas Stars this postseason. Rick Bowness clearly, even in the overtime periods where we've seen Kiviranta out there for big goals, is rolling four lines. Whereas John Cooper is really relying on his top lines. I mean, Cirelli, Point, Palat, and Cooch are all over 20 minutes a night, as opposed to their bottom three guys, which are Paquette, Stevens, and Verhaeghe at 12:15, 12:16, and 11:36. So that tells you a little bit that there's something going on where either Cooper just knows he needs to rely on his top line, or maybe he doesn't trust his bottom six, or maybe he's not using them as much as he should. And the reason that I bring this up is because the Dallas Stars are a physical team. The Lightning are coming off a pretty physical series against the New York Islanders, but the Dallas Stars are physical up and down the lineup. Whereas, yes, the New York Islanders, you have some big bodies like Anders Lee and Brock Nelson on the top two lines, but really it's that fourth line is the thing that wears you down so much that, the best fourth line in hockey with Cizikas, Martin, and Clutterbuck. Martin was leading the playoffs in hits. That's really the way that the Islanders wear you down. But the Dallas Stars up and down the lineup. I mean, if you take a look at their top four players as far as ice time on forwards is concerned, Pavelski, Sagan, Benn, and Faksa. We all know that Jamie Benn loves the physical game. We know that Joe Pavelski loves the physical game. Radek Faksa's got a little bit of a scrapper in him. And then if you look at their defensemen, their fourth highest defenseman at 21.43, Jamie Alexiak, the big rig. I mean, he's not afraid to put anybody through the boards, and he's done it several times these playoffs. And that would worry me if I was the Tampa Bay Lightning, because we know that they've been banged up a little bit. Braden Point missed Game 5 against the New York Islanders, and then during Game 6 was shaken up on a couple of big hits. We saw towards the end of the game, Mikhail Sergachev was shaken up on a couple of big hits from Cal Clutterbuck. He was skating around kind of gingerly towards the end there. And the question for me is, if you're going to play Braden Point against Jamie Benn or Joe Pavelski, you have to be worried about him taking a hit every shift. If you were playing Braden Point against the Barzal, Lee, Eberle line, chances are, unless he gets in the corner with Anders Lee, he's probably going to be fine. But against Pavelski and Benn or Faksa, you're going to take a hit. And if Braden Point goes down, then what's your next option? Steven Stamkos reportedly is getting really, really close to playing. He will not play tonight. He has been ruled out of Game 1. But, if you get Steven Stamkos back, that's great. Because if Braden Point does go down with an injury, well, now you have Steven Stamkos, but then you have to worry about Steven Stamkos. When he comes back, is he going to be able to stand up to getting hit all night by Jamie Benn, Joe Pavelski, Corey Perry, Jamie Alexiak? You have to worry about these things. I'm not so much worried about the Dallas Stars because even their goal scorers are usually bigger guys. Radulov is a bit of a freight train. Guryanov's a bigger guy. Jamie Benn can take a hit with the best of them. I'm not really worried about the Dallas Stars, physical health as much as I am worried about the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I'm not saying that the Dallas Stars are going to go out there with the mindset of, well, we're going to hurt all their players. We're going to injure them out of the series. But let's be honest here. This is playoff hockey. And if you get a chance to finish a check on a Braden Point when you know he's not 100%, you're going to do it. And if you get a chance to, when Steven Stamkos comes back, to lay him out, you're going to do it. You get a chance to knock a guy like Sergachev out of a game with a couple big hits, you're going to do it. That's just the way this game is played. Just the same way that if Pat Maroon gets a clean lick in on Tyler Seguin, he's going to hit him. Or if Blake Coleman can line up Guryanov, he's going to hit him. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just playoff hockey. And we see that that's the main thing that concerns me about the Tampa Bay Lightning is that against other teams, you really have to worry about their bottom guys hitting you. You don't have to worry about Nikita Kucherov, Andre Palat, Braden Point, Gyler Johnson. You don't have to worry about these guys throwing hits. You're not really worried about Mikhail Sergachev or Ryan McDonough catching you with a big hit. But against the Dallas Stars, you have to be worried about getting blown up by Tyler Seguin or Joe Pavelski. It's just the reality of the way that this team is built. So it's not like Oh, my throat. Sorry, guys. Got a bit of a dry throat coming on now. Been talking for 35 minutes. But you can't just say, okay, we can take a shift off. They put out the first line. We're not going to get hit the shift. No, every single line on this Dallas Stars team is going to hit you. And if your best players aren't 100%, got to be worried about that. And the fact that John Cooper already doesn't trust his depth forwards as much as Rick Bowness does, that would worry me a little bit. That would worry me. If Braden Point goes out and if Stamkos comes back and he's not 100%, then, we saw against the New York Islanders that the 2 games that the Islanders won, Braden Point was not in the lineup. And he's clearly an engine on this team. And if you lose Braden Point for an extended amount of time, you're going to have to trust your depth forwards, which is something that John Cooper has shown that he doesn't want to do. If you go back to 12 forward 6D, can you afford to have your defenseman pushing the pace as much? And then if you don't have your defenseman pushing the pace as much, you have to make that adjustment. And I'm not saying the Tampa Bay Lightning can't win this series. I don't want you guys to think that I'm going to bat just for the Dallas Stars because I only picked them in my bracket and I don't like the Lightning because they eliminated the Islanders, blah, 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 blah. I just want to be a countering voice to everyone that's saying, well, the Lightning are just going to roll them. Lightning are a better team. They're way more points. They're way more scorers. They're way more talented. Even the team stats show it. Well, not really necessarily. That being said, the Dallas Stars have shown that they're winning games they probably shouldn't be at this point. Like I said, a lot of those games against the Vegas Golden Knights, every single game except for game 1, they were outshot. And I don't have the possession numbers, but I'd almost be willing to bet they were outpossessed every single game. And that's playing with fire. And if there's any team in the NHL, there are 2 teams in the NHL you cannot play with fire against. That is the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Dallas Stars got, I will say, a little bit fortunate against the Colorado Avalanche to have, unfortunately, both Philip Grubauer and Pavel Francouz go down with injury. That is never ideal for any team, specifically a team like the Colorado Avalanche. It's unfortunate that happened to them, but they got a little bit fortunate, and you take what you can get in the playoffs. But you can't just say, all right, well, Hudobin's going to save everything we need him to save, and we'll be opportunistic. We'll get 25 shots a night, but we'll put in 3 goals because we're going to be burying all of our chances. You can't really afford to do that against a team like Tampa Bay Lightning because chances are Andre Vasilevsky is going to be able to bail him out on a couple of those. So you really have to try to push the pace against the Lightning, or at the very least, if you don't want to push the pace, if you don't want to get into a foot race, because I do think that the Dallas Stars would lose that foot race. Maybe not their defensemen, that all the defensemen can skate pretty well, but the best way to keep Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Tyler Johnson off the score sheet is to have them 200 feet away from your net. And unfortunately for the Dallas Stars, that has not been something they've been able to do. They've been defending an awful lot in these playoffs. And if you're really going to give Victor Hedman, Sergachev, Kucherov, Point, you're going to give them that much time in the offensive zone, they're going to burn you. And that's something that would worry me if I was the Dallas Stars, is we have to find a way to generate puck possession. A lot of the Dallas Stars goals have come off of rushes where they get 3 or 4 defensemen, or they get 3 or 4 players up the ice. They get a defenseman to join in a rush, specifically a Heiskanen or Lindell or Klingberg. They get them to join the rush. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have been the same way. The Lightning D has been incredibly active during these playoffs. They love to join the rush. They love to lead that offensive push. But, if I was the Stars, I'd be saying, look, scoring off the rush is fantastic, but we have to find a way to generate zone time, because we have to get guys like Kucherov off the ice before he gets into our zone. So I think, for the Dallas Stars to win this series, which I do think they will, but for the Dallas Stars to win this series, they need to play in the offensive zone. They need to get more puck possession. They need to be either generate more offense or be as opportunistic as they were in the last series where they simply scored on almost all of the chances they had. And they need to play physical. This is the deepest Tampa Bay Lightning team we've ever seen. That is without a doubt. Up and down the lineup, this is a solid stacked lineup. But that being said, we know that some guys on the Lightning are a little bit shaken up. So if you can get a clean body check on Braden Point or Kucherov or Sergachev, that's a facet of the game where the Dallas Stars have the advantage because they can hit up and down the lineup. Whereas, yes, the Lightning have some really good pieces up and down the lineup. They have a guy like Blake Coleman. They have their Pat Maroon. They have a guy like Victor Hedman will even throw a hit every now and then. But the Dallas Stars have 4 lines and 6 defensemen. Well, 4 lines and 3 defensemen that will all hit you. And that's something that they need to push. So they need to generate puck possession. They need to play physical, and they need to be opportunistic because you don't get a lot of opportunities against Tampa Bay Lightning. So the ones that you do get, you have to score. I mean, the Islanders proved that last series where the Islanders had a couple of times where they had some big chances that they simply did not put away, and it ended up with them losing the series. You have to put away your goals against against Tampa Bay Lightning. You just have to. Because a guy like Vasilevsky and that defense isn't going to give you that many opportunities. The keys to the series for the Tampa Bay Lightning are force the Dallas Stars to play in a way that limits the rush opportunities for their defensemen. Now, what do I mean by that? The Tampa Bay Lightning need to play with speed. If the Lightning can play with speed to the neutral zone, you'll force guys like Heiskanen, Lindell, and Klingberg to back up, play defense, and then maybe not want to take that risk of breaking the puck out and going for a skate. You know, if you're generating odd man rushes, breakaways, 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, 4-on-2s to the neutral zone, you're going to force guys like Heiskanen, Klingberg, and Lindell to take a second look at it and be like, all right, maybe I need to play more conservatively because we're getting killed here on these odd man rushes and the puck's in the back of our net. And that would be a huge blow because we've seen Heiskanen, lead the Dallas Stars in points through pretty much this entire playoff run for them. So if you can force that doubt in the minds of the Dallas Stars defensemen, then yeah, you're going to be successful. So attack with speed is a big one for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Score early, score often, because you don't want to give this Dallas Stars team a chance to come back. I mean, we've seen it happen several times during this playoff series for them. I think it was Game 6 against the Calgary Flames. They were down 3-0, and then they rattled off like 6 goals in a row. So you have to score often. You can't just put up 2 goals and say, all right, pack it in. We won the game, boys. It's not going to happen that way. And the third one is just be ready for the physical play of the Dallas Stars. If you can find a way to avoid a hit, definitely do that, because they have some players who are shaken up and who missed some time in the last series or over the course of the playoffs. So you can't be taking these big body checks all series long, because if Braden Point goes out and then if Stamkos comes back and he's not 100%, you're really starting to force John Cooper to play a way he doesn't want to play. Overall, I think this is a much closer series than people are giving it credit for. I do see a lot of people saying, oh, the Lightning are going to win this one easily, boys. Looks like a 5-game series to me. And to be fair, could this Tampa Bay Lightning team win this in 5? Absolutely. I mean, they're definitely talented enough to do it, but not only are they talented enough to do it, they're deep enough to do it. And that's the biggest difference between this year and last year, is they're a deeper team this year. They're more balanced. They have more physical play. And they're firing on all cylinders. So I could very easily see this series being won very quickly by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not saying it can't happen. I just think that people are not giving the Dallas Stars credit enough for running through a bracket that included the Colorado Avalanche, a team a lot of people thought were going to the Stanley Cup Finals this year, and the Vegas Golden Knights, a team that people thought was going to win the Stanley Cup this year. Dallas Stars took down the Avs in 7, and they took down the Vegas Golden Knights, a Stanley Cup favorite, in 5 games, and people are not giving them enough credit for that. Ultimately, I think Dallas will win this. I think it'll take 7 games because these two teams are just too good not to go the distance. I do think the Dallas Stars will win it. Am I super confident about that? No. I would say I'm feeling like a 55 to 45% chance for the Dallas. So 55% chance for the Dallas Stars to win, 45% chance for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and even that might be a bit too much. It's a very close series that I don't think a lot of people are giving the Stars credit for. And I think the matchup on paper, specifically the physical nature of this Dallas Stars team, might give the Tampa Bay Lightning a lot more issues than people think. So game 1 is going to be tonight. Of course, I'll be watching. We'll try to keep up with what's going on. Well, not try to. We will be keeping up with what's going on with the Stanley Cup Finals. Next episode, whenever that may be, might be a series midpoint. It might be, who knows? I mean, it depends on how long this series goes. We'll definitely do an episode before the series is over. We'll try to do it, 4 games in probably to kind of say what happens. Or maybe we'll do it on Monday when there's game 2. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. I'm not really sure when the next episode is going to be. And then after that, it's going to be a very interesting off season. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen, and this is going to be a very, very transformative off season for a lot of franchises. There's a lot of big names that will no longer be in the sweaters that they were for a long time. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's going to be a very exciting off season. So obviously we're going to keep up with the free agency stuff, the trades. We'll do an award ceremony wrap up at the end. And we'll figure everything out from there. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.